Good evening, everyone. We are once again in a new episode of Cyber Prophets, prophesizing the future of IT. My name is Edgar, and I'm going to be your co-host today, together with our last interviewee, Genjay Hasura. Genjay.
Yeah, hey there. I'm happy to be this time on the other side, and yeah, we got a cool person here as an interview today. So Edgar, can you tell us more about Federico?
Sure. Today we're going to be interviewing the person who is normally our host. And this person has a lot of experience as a software developer. It's very professional in his career. He has more than 13 years of experience coding in the corporate world and also in his own personal projects. He has been working as a professional developer, trying to apply all of these best practices, not only in the coding world, but also in his personal life. And recently, he has been showing his skills in art because he recently published a book called Timeless Stories of El Salvador. You can check it out later in the description. And now, let me introduce you to Federico. Federico, welcome to the show.
Thank you, everyone. This is a great experience to try to be on the other side of the equation, and let's see how it goes.
Let's see. I know, I'm pretty sure we'll have a lot of fun today. Today, we're gonna be speaking about a topic which is, to me, as a software developer, still quite new. And it is about low-code platforms. These are like some platforms that are supposed that you do not require code, but to be honest, I don't know much about that topic. So Federico, can you please first tell us what are these low-code platforms?
I am pretty sure that you have at least once in your lifetime built your own application, your own website, but sometimes even more complex things like machine learning models, those fancy new things that are appearing in the market. But yeah, the first thing that comes to your mind, I need a specialist. I need to pay a bunch of money, and a specialist would cost me over 100 or $200,000 per year. And this is where the low-code platforms come into play. Companies like Microsoft, Outsystems, Google, and many others decided, hey, we already know a lot of things about coding, and let's build some platforms, mostly web applications. There are some exceptions, but yeah, most of them are web applications that allow you to build your own mobile applications for Android, iOS, your own website. Maybe you have heard of Wix.com. I would say this is one of the most well-known low-code platform, but not, I would say, something that really empowers industries. But yeah, the low-code platforms empower any person who doesn't have any IT knowledge to develop their own application. And in a couple of clicks, in a couple of drag and drops, they can develop their own app and publish it immediately to the App Store, to the Android Store, and literally go to production in less than a day.
Okay, you mentioned something about machine learning. As you may know from the previous episode, I'm a huge fan of machine learning, and I'm concerned about this machine learning drag and drop models. Are those actually a low-code solution or zero-code? Because I have also heard a zero-code term. So which one of those is actually this, and what is the difference between those two types?
You have both of them, but not in the same platform. In the case of machine learning, you have Google Cloud AutoML. This is a no-code solution. It's not zero code. The term that we use is no code. That means is that I come with my, let's say, Excel, CSV, my database from anything else. It can be any kind of relational database. I bring it to Google Cloud, and then you choose certain algorithms because it's a no code. So I define certain patterns, certain characteristics, but I cannot influence. If, for example, the Google's algorithm doesn't support me or it's not what I expect, for example, I want to detect lizards, but for any reason the Google algorithm only can detect cats, then you can only detect cats. So this is not the right platform for you. And this is no good because they restrict you to what Google wants. But honestly speaking, is like Google is one of the greatest places in the market related to artificial intelligence and machine learning. I will be very, very surprised that you will find one topic that Google cannot manage it. One thing is that it's going to be extremely efficient, but well, we're speaking that you're using the power of the Google servers, so it's not going to be like you're going to have a more efficient machine than theirs. And then you have the low-code platforms like Google, like Microsoft Azure. In Azure Machine Learning, you have two options. One is the real, like a coder. I'm going to type code in C# or Python or anything, and I'm going to build my machine learning models. And then there is a low-code platform where I build how to call it, a flow chart, where I set where the data is coming from, which algorithm I'm going to use, if I need to split the data, if I need to process the information, if I need to create a cache in some place, if I need to store the information. And at the end, it's going to deliver you like a JSON or something that in the technical world we call it a web service or an API. Like people now call everything an API. In my times, it was a web service. So it delivers you that, and then you can immediately consume you, saving you a lot of time. So you have both options. The low code is, in my experience, only available in Microsoft Azure, where you can even build your own, let's say, libraries from Python, integrate something from Python, not only Python, you can have R too, but those libraries, you need to adapt them to the Azure environment. And in the Google Cloud AutoML is zero code. There is, let's say, if something doesn't meet your requirements, then it doesn't meet your requirements. There is nothing else to be done.
Wow, it seems quite impressive to me that such platforms already exist. And it seems that we're getting like very, very technical here. So before we get deep into this topic of the low-code platforms, I would like to hear more about your experience, Federico, about your personal experience with these kind of tools. So my first question will be, where did you hear for the first time about low-code platforms?
I will say that I didn't listen in the traditional way. As some of people who knows me better, I am a very uncommon developer who tests everything. And I consider myself as a lazy coder. That means I want to code as less as possible. I don't want to be fighting with random libraries. I don't want to be fighting with random bugs. If I can find something that makes my work easier, then I'm going to use it. And this is how I discovered the low-code platforms in the beginning, when I discovered Azure Machine Learning Studio. I was in my work and someone told me, hey man, you want to learn about machine learning, but the issue is that you have no idea about the statistics about anything related to math. Right, you're right. That was like around 4 or 5 years ago. And then in my company, I started with this project of using Azure Machine Learning Studio, that we provided some input of data that was like around 30 years of information. Then my colleague started to show me how he started to build the flowchart. He chose certain algorithms like the Black Forest or other algorithms. This he started to build the machine learning model. He was testing, because we didn't have a specific timeline. For around 3 months, he was building the right algorithm, building the flowchart. Then a year later, I moved to a new area. In the organization where I'm currently working, everything is about automation. Everything is about automation. They don't evaluate me if my code is 150% more efficient. They don't really care if this is going to take 3 seconds. If this is not bringing any savings or revenues for my company, it's like, who cares? For them, the most important is how many savings, how many FTEs are you saving? An FTE is a full-time employee, or is this the specific KPI that evaluates me? A year later, it came a new solution called Automation Anywhere. Automation Anywhere is an application that allows you to emulate whatever you do in the computer. Literally, if you have a flowchart that you start in one point and you finish in one point, and this is going to send emails, register information in a website, get data from eBay, Amazon, anything, you can literally just drag and drop and start creating the connections. you don't need to code. If you're a regular coder, the first thing that will come to your mind is, well, I need to access to a specific API in Windows Forms or in Python or anything like that. And in fact, you can do it. But with Automation Anywhere, I have something called object cloning. Object cloning will come. I give an option like, okay, I want to access to the button that is in the form of Facebook. So this has a recorder. The recorder goes to Facebook. I click in the button, and voila, I get the code. I didn't need to write any line of code, and immediately I have the solution. So more or less in the last 3 or 4 years, I have learned more about them, but it was not the first time that I heard about it. Generally, if you have ever seen, like I can consider the first low-code platform is WordPress. This tool has been for over 10 years in the market. And it's the same case with the RPAs. The first RPA was Blue Prism that appeared, if I'm not wrong, around 2003 or 2001 in the United Kingdom. So none of these solutions is so new. They are mainly known in the
RPA,
enterprise.
Federico?
An RPA is in the current environment, they call them like cybernetic robots. So they are like, generally when a human thinks in a robot, you will think in an Asimo, in a huge machine that is going to replace you, the one that is going to start typing in the computers, but really, that's a really expensive machine. An RPA is like a small application that can do everything that I say, that is going to type in the keyboard, is going to open Excel, Word, or create you a presentation by itself, send everything to the owner or to the provider or to whoever you want, and does everything by itself without any human interaction. There are other kind of RPAs that allows human interaction, because there are some cases like when you have we call them hard tokens, that is like a device where you get like the double authentication. This is mostly related to banks. So when you have like second authentication, then some of them you have like hard tokens to prevent that people access badly this information. So you need to type it. And in these cases, you use the second kind of RPAs, but most of organizations do not want them because they're more expensive to support.
So will you say that an RPA is a low-code platform?
It is.
It is. Okay. And I heard you also mentioned very interesting tool. I think its name was Automation Anywhere. Okay. So have you used any other tools out there for the usage of low-code platforms?
Yes, I have used 2 more. The second one is UiPath, that is another robotic process automation tool. And more recently, I started to work with someone called Celonis, that is for process mining. Process mining is a very specific sector that you need to have domain knowledge, let's say finance, procurement, medicine, pharmaceutics, anything. What does Celonis is that it connects with any database that you have from any tool that you have, SAP, SQL, NoSQL, anything really. It can connect, and not only one source, it can connect 20, 30, 50 sources. And what it does is that analyze all processes, because they have their own DNA that as an identifier, that is the action, the time stamp, and certain things, and it creates you all these are the most recurrent steps, and it builds you an entire flowcharts. Like, this is the most common path that people follow, or these are the most common actions that the people do, or you want to analyze some exceptions. For example, when you do a currency exchange, what happens? So Celonis is capable of giving you all those steps and help you optimize every single process. And this is another low-code. Well, I could consider Celonis as a no-code platform until now. In theory, it's a low-code platform, but I haven't reached the point where I can, let's say, modify it. Maybe in the next 1 or 2 months, I will know how far I can go. But Celonis is really, you can connect with whatever database that you can imagine and give you a process. Recently I discovered that, in fact, no, I wouldn't consider it as a low code until this moment. I was thinking in something else that I discovered in the tool, but I wouldn't consider it. It's still, for me, it's still no code.
Actually, as a backend developer, like mostly backend developer, I'm the person who doesn't like too much to work with front-end part. So probably I would be looking for some low-code solutions for the front-end part. How can I actually develop the front-end part with the least investment of time? Because the typical approach that I take right now is I just search for some sample front ends on the internet and copy paste those and modify at my will. So probably you got some better ideas how to deal with this problem.
Yeah, I can recommend you two tools. One, for me, the best one is called Outsystems. When you're building apps, Outsystems is the number one in the market, and they have like almost everything that you have thought in mind. There are a couple of things that you need to consider when you're working with low-code platforms. They are mainly enterprise solutions. They are thinking organizations, but you can use it. There is no that restriction. It's just that sometimes when you're a coder, you might have that feeling that I don't have that full control of what I'm doing. So that's something that you need to keep in mind. That's why they are thought for enterprises. Well, yeah, the the first one is Outsystems. I will say that Outsystems is not only the core of the application. It's so powerful that it really builds native applications. It's not that you embed a website into an app. It's an extremely powerful solution that builds apps. The second one that you can consider is Mendix. Mendix, I will say it's fine. It's still, you can do the same. You will get the apps, but since they are like in any statistics, there is a significant difference between the two players. And the new player that is starting in the market, and I will say one that might become extremely powerful in the near future, is Microsoft Power Apps. And that's the main reason. It's backed by a large organization as Microsoft. Mm-hmm. It's not built on a startup. They already have Xamarin, they already have Blazor, they already have many solutions that are multi-platform. So you can be sure that over the next 3 or 4 years, I believe that Microsoft Power Apps is going to take like a massive advantage. And any organization that has access to Office 365 is already in the package, so I don't need to do any extra payment. Of course, if I want additional features, new connectors, new other things, yeah, you need to do an extra payment. But if you access to your Office 365 account, you go to the ellipsis and Power Apps is there.
So, Federico, we are listening right now to many names. You're giving us many names of the tools that we can use, such as Mendix, Microsoft Power Apps, Celonis, etc. And I'm pretty sure our audience can benefit from the use of them. And just to follow up with the topic, we have talked about the front end, but I would like to know if these low-code platforms can go beyond just the UI and can be used, for instance, for the management of a database or for some backend transactions. Is that also possible as well?
I'm honest with this topic, but we already have UIs for managing databases. This is like a very surprising question because we have like SQL Server Management Studio that literally you can manage everything like in an UI without going to deep codes. You can do the same with MySQL. Like I forgot the tool from MySQL, but I think that this tool have been in the market for around like 7 to 8 years. MySQL Workbench is one of the most crazier tools I have ever used. And I started to use this tool like 8 years ago, that you can create like literally the entire database visually without going into create table or those things. You can do everything from there, manage the database. You can already create queries, but I don't see this like something so new, at least for me. As I said, I'm a lazy coder. You are not going to see me using a console. The console is not my best friend. I tend to avoid it as much as I can. But those tools have been in the market for a pretty long time because as humans, let's be honest, we moved away from the console many, many years ago. And if we think carefully in one of the topics about low code, everything goes in this direction. The cloud, in a certain way, can be considered as a low code tool too. Why? Because we're not managing the servers anymore. We're not controlling how much RAM is consuming. We're not dealing like how much CPU is consuming the new, let's say, the new functions from Azure. We want just to release it to the server, and the server should do everything on its own. So think it carefully. Low code is becoming more and more prevalent because even the coders want to code less and they don't want to go to deal with the servers.
I'm kind of curious because on one hand, going out from the code can be, let's say, simplification for the developer. On the other hand, it actually is something that limits your possibilities, limits your ways to customize things. So is it actually a good direction to go away from these possibilities to customize the product that you are using to solutions which are actually giving you full service? However, this service can sometimes be not sufficient for the use. And what are your thoughts and experience on this topic?
I will say there are like two mindsets, I will say. One mindset that I need to highlight, as I said in the beginning, these solutions are for the enterprise. They are not thinking general people like general coders who love to code, who love to open Eclipse, Visual Studio, and start coding. No. The low-code platforms are thought in organizations. Like, let's suppose that you work for Coca-Cola. What is the core business of Coca-Cola? Sell you as much Coke as possible. Their main core business is not to build code that analyzes your trends, why you like Coke, why you like water, why you don't like Fanta. That's not their core business. Yeah, they build those models because they need to analyze where the market is going. But in the long term, their business is always related about selling Coke. In the end, it's not related to coding. And this is where most of coders sometimes forget that part. That if you're not working in an organization that builds the apps, that builds the software, that builds these solutions, that's not their core business. And the majority of the businesses in the world are not IT related. If you go to a farm, the farm needs to produce food to sell to the shops. A shop focused on, let's say a grocery shop, focused on what? On build and, let's say, giving you food or water or selling you something else. If I go to a gym, it's a similar story. I rent my machines so people can use them. So from this perspective, these organizations can, instead of hiring a very expensive coder or a very expensive software developer, I am the domain expert. I can build my own app. I don't need that my app is the most beautiful one, the excellent in every sense. I just need an app that can people register payments for my company, and that I receive the money from the gym membership, and that's pretty much all. If the UI is great or not, well, I think the gym guys, they enjoy to lift weights or use my bicycles or have my trainees, but they don't really care about if the UI is cool. And that's one of the sides. The low-code platforms empower people to build these apps. The second case, when you're working with like robotic process automation and use these kind of applications, they are focused on minimizing your work. So they want that you reduce all those repetitive tasks in as fast as you can. So you can get the revenue like, okay, I'm releasing 5 fees tomorrow. So this means, like, let me say 20,000, like SWOT is around $5,000 less per month. So how much am I saving? But if I'm gonna code the same application, it will take me like 7-8 months. Yeah, it will be more efficient. But to build the RPA, it will take me 3 to 6 weeks in average. And if I want to optimize the process, like to analyze like how long, now I have the RPA, now I want to optimize it and reduce more cost. Okay, how am I going to do it? then Celonis comes into play and give you, okay, this is the path, these are the steps that you need to reduce or maybe build a second RPA. But if I'm going to hire someone to do all those steps, it will take you more money. So the low-code platforms is like a real trend that they are integrated in many, many fields. They are becoming specialized in one area. For example, the RPAs are only RPAs. Let's say the app builders are only app builders. The process mining apps are only process mining apps. They're real specialists in their area, but they can be integrated among multiple tools. And the second area, when you think about customizing on those things, I believe that this is a great idea when you rely that the people can use the app, that you rely that the people enjoys the application, that the most important is the user experience. But as I said, the low code are not only about building nice UIs. The RPAs, you don't really care about the UI. As in Celonis is backend, and Google AutoML is backend again. You only care that it delivers you the right answer to your inquiry, not exactly if the UI is the best idea.
Okay, I'm very interested in these backend solutions because I think that as a backend developer, I could benefit from them as well. But as we mentioned during my interview, I'm using all the time like different data structures and different algorithms. We mentioned, for instance, the breadth first search algorithm and this kind of complex things. So I would like to ask you, Federico, how do low-code platforms deal with the complexity of an application? Like how complex can be these applications? Can you apply like data structures or algorithms in them as well?
Keep in mind that they are focused on specific sectors. Like, for example, if you're speaking about machine learning, like in the case of Google AutoML or Azure Machine Learning Studio, you have to have those complex algorithms. That's machine learning. Machine learning is not just like I'm going to use a data structure that goes around a loop. No, they really need to apply a lot of statistics. And since I can load my own algorithms to the solution, so yeah, they deal with those cases. What happens with the low-code platforms is that you need to remember they are specialized on one field. It's not that like I'm a Java developer, but at the same time I can build an Android app and I can build a website. Even if I usually use Angular instead of JSP, you can still do it. But the low codes are specific sectors like machine learning, process mining, web apps, mobile apps. So if you are in the right tool, then you can implement it, and if the provider allows you. However, they are for specific fields. Like I could say that in UiPath, if I want to build like my own library that implements one of those, let's say, complex algorithms like the breadth first or something like that, I can build it. Why? Because UiPath has access to something that only the Microsoft guys will know called the Nugget. So I can implement any library that is available in the Nugget in any RPA that is built in UiPath. So that's accessible. However, remember the case of the case of the RPAs is a repetitive task. If I don't need that algorithm to do something like that, then I could delegate that to a machine learning tool or something else. Because the RPA has like go to the top to the bottom, and it needs to have a cycle. And at the end of the cycle, it needs to start again and again. And that's the point of the RPA. It needs to carry on a repetitive task. It's not for like I have different paths and I follow thousands of solutions. Yeah, it can have that, but it's not the purpose of the application.
Okay, I think I kind of like imagine those local solutions like a kind of accessible web services using user interface. So, for example, as you mentioned, even AWS can be thought as local solution. So I'm kind of curious what are approaches to testing those solutions. How can I actually test if my code is working correctly, and in this way also build some test set to protect myself from regression with future changes.
Can you, let's say, go in depth? What do you mean in the testing area?
Yeah. Because, for example, I'm thinking that I can pretty much develop a full application using low code or no code solution. In this way, I finished my job having, let's say, a full product, for example, of a shop which has some UI, has some items in shop, and you can buy some items. Yeah. So in this case, if I have a low code solution, how can I actually make tests on that to see if everything that I want is happening in real in this application?
Let's suppose that you're building something in Outsystems. You can build pretty quickly an MVP because in the end the tool delivers you an APK or an APP and you upload to the Google Play or to the App Store. So then in the Google Play and the App Store, since these are the official places where you should download the apps, you can download it from, of course, from somewhere else and jailbreak your phone, but this is not the right way to go. Then you can test it. But this mostly relies that you need to have the accounts because in Google Play you have a beta environment, an alpha environment, and the same happens in the App Store. So that's something I would say that is not exactly under control. You need to deliver it to a third person because they are the testers in the end.
So there's no such thing as an automated testing, or let's say like last unit testing as we have it in normal software development.
Not really. I wouldn't say so. It all depends on the sector because low code is a very broad term. If we focus only on app development, there will be certain rules that will not apply to the machine learning development. They are completely different because, as I said, they are specialized on one specific area. And if we are speaking about the RPAs, in my experience, will be extremely tough, if not nearly impossible to implement unit testing. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but because they are like flow charts, it will be extremely hard in that sense to implement it. Mm-hmm. And these applications can be built, let's say, even by a person who is not like really educated. Let's say if your secretary has access to Office 365, she can build an app. It doesn't need to be a coder, the one who built it. What happens if the manager wants to build an app? Well, he just access to his account and he build it. So you can be sure that none of these people will think on unit testing because they have no idea what is these topics. And since they are focused on the enterprise and that they should be developed as quick as possible, I don't think that none of us will go to the manager and say, hey guys, you are not using unit testing. You need to implement it. Your manager will only look at you and say, what is that? And I have other things to do. Maybe you should do it.
On the other hand, Federico, that brings the possibility of having defectful software in production. And as this secretary doesn't know anything about software development, there might be a lot of bugs in the software or like in the final solution, there might be she forgot about one step or the calculation is having some issues. So how do you avoid this kind of situation if there's no such thing as unit testing?
One of the things that when you use a local platform is that in this one it's not exactly like you can work in certain agile way, but in this area you need to have mostly a domain expertise. And it's not that, let's suppose that someone who is like, generally when you build let's say something for a pharmacy or a bank and you delegate this code to a software developer and we give them a lot of guidance that how he needs to understand the business. In the low-code platforms, generally are the domain experts the one who tends to use them. I have even a conversation about one of these areas when I was starting to learn about Celonis because it's a pretty hard topic to understand because everything in the examples were about procurement. I have never worked in procurement, so it was pretty tough to understand. So I spoke with a friend who works in this area, and she told me, man, the thing is that about low code and specifically about Celonis and process mining is that you need to have domain expertise. And if you don't have that domain expertise, then you're going to face all the questions that you are asking me, because you need to understand about procurement, you need to understand everything like this. So do I think that the manager or these guys can make a mistake in production? Yeah, it can happen. But at the same time, it's less probable because they are the domain experts. If there is a person who understands mostly about the calculations or anything related to certain area, it's a domain expert. But as I said again, it depends on the local that you want to deal. Is it an app? Is it an RPA? Is it a machine learning model? You need to be very precise in which one, because all of them follow completely different rules. And since they are from specific providers, if there is a bug in, let's say, an Outsystem, that bug not necessarily happens in Microsoft Power Apps, because they are completely independent organizations.
Okay, that's, I think, a kind of a good approach, because I think, as you mentioned, the machine learning it's kind of even hard to think about the testing of those solutions, because typically you work at the monitoring level when you think about those solutions. I think that from the interview that we are having, that the very huge benefit of those applications is actually the speed of development. And actually, I think that also touches some early validations with customer. So is it right to think that those solutions have a very huge strength when it comes to building MVP and prototypes?
Yes. Let's suppose that when you speak of MVP, let's take a mobile app. Let's not focus on the others because the others are different, but let's say I want to build a mobile app for a shop, like, as you said, let's suppose a small like a grocery store that was open in the city, and these guys didn't have a mobile app. They had their own database because, well, they required to manage the products and everything, but they didn't have a mobile app. They can go to Outsystems, connect their database, and they can build an MVP even in the same day. I'm not saying that it's going to be the best solution that's going to follow all the patterns and everything related, but you can have a mobile app in the same mere day that is testable, and some people can upload it and even install it. If you have the place where you are going to store it, then you can do it. The same will happen with a machine learning model, but that one we know we need tests, we need enough data, we need to have test data. So it might take a little bit more, but it can take a very short period of time. And the same will happen with an RPA. The process to automate the process with an RPA, and let's suppose that you have the right documentation, you don't have many exceptions. Let's suppose a good business case will take you between 3 to 6 weeks to have a full solution. And if you build it from scratch, I saw someone who did it in Python, and he took around 7 months. The same solution, from 3 to 6 weeks to 7 months. Of course, his solution in Python was way more efficient. It was extremely fast in comparison. It was from another world. Let's call it in that way. But if I compare this 7 months versus 3 to 6 months, I will say the client will be happy with the other solution, even if it's not as efficient as the other.
Well, I can see the.
Yeah,
go
let
ahead,
me go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me go with one follow-up question to that, because I know that you are taking part a lot of in different contests like hackathons, and I'm curious how actually applicable are those local solutions in terms of hackathons? How often are they used in those type of solutions in which the time is very restricted to build it up?
I'm honest, but really in the hackathons, I don't think that most of coders use them because they're coders. And the first thing that we'll say is scalable, extremely efficient. I want to have the best algorithms. I want to use certain things. None of them will think outside that box that I want to write the best code and with the nicest UI, and none of them thinks in that way. And I think that if I was in those shoes like 7 years ago, I would be on the same because I didn't have no clue about these solutions. But now, if I was in those shoes, what I will do is like, well, we need some part that is backend, so delegate that part to the backend, and then if we really want to win, the best idea is to use an OutSystem solutions or something like that. If you don't need something very precise, like let's suppose that you need a specific camera algorithm that identifies certain specific movements, behaviors, or something like that, why would you bother with that? Like really, it's like I as a coder, I know that like 7 years ago, that was my first thing. My first thought will be I need to code it, and but this is not only me. It's like generally coders will think in that way. You need to think a little bit outside your box to think, well, this solution can work. And in a hackathon, you need to have a vision. I want to win. And if you don't have that vision, but you have the vision of coding, then there will be a conflict of interest.
I have now also a follow-up question, and it's quite related to what Genji just mentioned. He mentioned the topic about hackathons, which can be an use case of where low-code platforms can be very beneficial. I was thinking more on the business side with startups. Startups need to get a prototype, an MVP, to the market as soon as possible and start getting feedback in order to improve it. So this comes to me like a very, very specific and very beneficial point of the use of low-code platforms. So my question is, Federico, do you know of any other use cases or any other specific cases in which the use of low-code platforms can bring a lot of benefit?
Yeah, I know one. I know one case, but it's not from a startup. It's from Hershey's.
Hershey's.
Yeah, long ago they wanted to test, say, a new product that they wanted to deliver, and they did all the analysis from machine learning without a single data scientist. No data scientist. They only build the rules in Azure Machine Learning Studio. They always loaded the considerable data that Hershey's has for their significant years, and that's how they release their new product. No single data scientist into the place. And this is a real case scenario that you can find more information in the Microsoft website. So this is the power of low-code platforms. And low-code platforms are not used only for small organizations. It's like if you go to, let's say, LinkedIn and type the word Pega, the word automation anywhere, then the words Outsystems, Power Apps, and Mendix, and those things, you will find those job offers. I have a friend who works in a tool called Pega. That's a completely different, let's say, specialized area. And almost daily he gets new offers in that thing. And why? Because a few people likes to learn about low code. It's like mostly I'm a coder, so I want to code. So I don't want to use those tools. And my friend finished there because he's not a natural coder. He used to work as in procurement. Then he got an offer in IT. He learned about coding. Then they specialized him in Pega. He didn't want, but in the end he didn't have a choice. He didn't have his previous job, and then he became a specialist in that field. But there is one thing that there is only one reason why I think that the startups are not so open to use low code. But this is my personal opinion, and is that even though you have some free options, they might not fit your needs. Because it's like everything. If you want to go to the free option, you will have a lot of restrictions. And if you want the real option, you need to pay a monthly fee. And this is why I think that the startups are like more like, I want to code because when I code, I don't need to pay. But if I thinking on the, like as a business person, the person who is coding, if it was not coding for free, it will be more expensive than using the low code tool. It's mostly that I have a friend who is the coder, but if I didn't have that friend and I have a normal startup, then the low code will reduce a lot of money. But my belief is mostly that you need to have a fee, and it depends on the tool. You might pay between $15 to a maximum of 40 to 60 for a small startup per month. It depends on the tools, because if you want to combine machine learning and other tools, then you will need to pay more.
That's interesting. I think that I would ask about something more about those prices and actually the pricing of the solutions. What are the use cases in which it is beneficial actually to use it to, let's say, reduce the price of the development and the maintenance of some solution? And in what circumstances we should actually avoid using those? And just go with normal development.
Let's suppose that I have an internal organization that needs to create a lot of forms to collect information. Yeah, you might say Google Forms is an option. Yeah, organizations need more privacy. And Google Forms is like you're exposing your data to a third-party organization that you don't know what they are doing with it. So you have access to Microsoft Power Apps. You can build all the app, the form, the collection. Let's build a real business case. I work for a factory. In the factory, I need to track all the actions. I need to go, let's say, with my device, and I need to analyze what is happening. If there is a leaking, if there is something not working, and if there is information that I need to collect manually, because not always we have IoT devices in a factory. Sometimes you cannot for privacy reasons. So what I do is like my organization, let's say, is going to build an app that is going to help the auditor to collect all the information by himself. So the auditor will come and start collecting the data. And this is a business case that you can use it for a small app. Let's say that you want to do an analysis of data, in the case for using a machine learning tool. Let's say you want to identify when you have the peaks of the sales in your organization. Maybe you identify that during the summer there is a huge drop, and then you identify there is a same trend in different organizations that everyone drops their sales. So you can build a new business case that instead of allowing your employees to be lazy, you can push them to work faster, and during those months to get money that the other organizations are losing too. And since this is like you have the data, you don't need to, let's say, do a huge investment to do this. I'm sure that the case that I gave you, even the no-code solution from Google Automl can do it. Now, when these tools are not a good idea, I would say when you have like too innovative idea, like Tinder was in its days. The Tinder was, as we know, that application that you swipe left, right, pictures, and getting the data. I don't believe that these tools are designed in that way, where there is a very specific UI, a very specific use business case. And Tinder is the best example for me that comes to my mind. There was nothing like that in its times, and it would be pretty hard to do it even with the current tools because they are not exactly thinking that way. Yeah, you will be able to do the buttons to reject and to like, but you will not be able to do the swipes. That's something that I don't think that it will be possible because it's too specific. But how do you know that is mostly about speaking with the client and understanding the needs. And it's something that you will understand on the way. But I would say is when you have a very, very custom solution, when there is high efficiency, high proficiency, high, like that everything needs to be extremely fast, then low code might not be the best solution.
Okay, Federico. I have also a question regarding licensing. You mentioned before that some of the platforms have some features for free, but if you want the whole set of features, you have to pay. And you also mentioned that it might be even cheaper to have these low-code platforms rather than a software developer team. So my question would be like, can you tell us how do payment works with these low-code platforms?
Let's take an example that I have like real prices, or at least for the last couple of months. Maybe they increase in these days, but from what I know, Microsoft Power Apps is around $15 per month. And I can develop as many apps as I want, unlimited apps, unlimited.
Wow.
And I have access to everything, like the SQL servers, Office 365, everything, literally. So I can connect with SharePoint, with Machine Learning Studio. I can build an API, integrate it, and I just pay the fee of $15 to build the apps. So if I make a small calculation, it's 150, 165, 100, 180 per year, something like that.
Around 180, yeah.
And if I hire a coder, and my organization is not a coding organization that needs to deliver high efficiency, high coding, high solutions, like the peak of the performance, a regular coder will cost me around, let's suppose that you are not working in the US, for like between 40 and 60,000 euros per year. So if I compare $180 from a solution provided by Microsoft, that maybe it's not going to be the fastest and the best solution, but it's Microsoft, versus the $60,000, is a massive difference and a massive saving for an organization. Even if I outsource the service, it's still a lot of money that I'm saving. And let's suppose the machine learning case, it will cost you more or less the same. Let's say, let's add them $220 extra. In the machine learning case, you still need the platform where you are going to run the machine learning model. You cannot run it on your own server. You still need to pay electricity, server, CPU, GPU, whatever. You still need something where to run it. So this is a cost. Let's suppose that this fixed cost will be around $100 per year. I still think it's too cheap, but let's say that is the cost. The machine learning specialist will be way more expensive than the regular coder. Way more expensive. Why? Because he's a specialist in one area that everybody wants to enter in that area, where really to have good developers in that field is not cheap, and especially that there are not a lot of business cases from my experience. So you need to find a person who will cost you maybe at least $125,000 per year, or let's say bring it to euros, around 100,000 euros per year. So it's still a lot of more money.
Okay, I think that I would like to touch something that I think it was even mentioned in a previous channel, and yeah, I was the person who was interviewed on this topic. So how actually does the low code go with the agile methodology? Is it a way to go because of the speed, or should it be, let's say, limited because of the customization capabilities? What are your thoughts about it? Because I'm kind of curious about it.
Let's say from the agile perspective, is way more faster because you can build an MVP even daily. So it's not like I need to have a sprint of 2 weeks if I have a move. It can be even daily. If I have the right things, even daily I can show to the client, okay, you don't like this, okay, let's remove it, garbage, throw it to the garbage bin. So it can be even daily to release something. Yeah, but if there is a customization, here comes a very difficult point if the solution is a no code. If it's no code, it's no code. So there is no custom features. And if it's low code, it will depend on what you want. Some customizations, like the one that I said about swiping left or right in Tinder, you might need to even get in contact with the provider in such a case. And you might need to pay to the provider extra if you want that feature. So it will depend on how much custom it needs to be, how much specific is the field. So if it's in the case of machine learning, I would say you are more open since you can combine them in some cases, like no code and coding, but it will depend on the solution. In some cases, it will be like that joke of let's say, of adding a custom button will take you like, can take you like 1 month or even more. And in such a scenario can kill the entire agile project. So my advice, if you really need something very, very custom, do it until the end. If it's not something that is extremely required, that is something that is like the main core business, like the swipe left and right or left, as I said, from Tinder, you still can do it with the buttons. So you can still have the business case to test. If not, I will deliver it until the end because it can take you really long time, really long time.
I think that those are kind of interesting technologies, and I'm kind of curious about the community around those technologies nowadays. So suppose I'm thinking about using one of the low-code solutions for my prototypes in the future, but on the other hand, I also would like to go with something that maybe will have the customization I want. So how wide is the community, and how accurate information can I get actually about such type of topics?
In my experience, if you're gonna use a local platform, I will go to the top in the market. I will be very careful to go to a startup or to go even to an open source solution with the exception of WordPress. Because WordPress is I would say, the biggest exception in this market. But yeah. I wouldn't, let's say, if you're going to the RPAs, I will go strictly Automation Anywhere, UiPath, Microsoft Power Apps, or Blue Prism. I wouldn't think it too much if in other tools, because let's say the communities will be almost non-existent, or you will have no documentation. So I wouldn't touch them. And if you're going to build apps, Mendix or Outsystems, and I wouldn't even touch the others because of the same thing. It's like, I can give you an example of going to the open source, and it wasn't the case with an RPA. It was impossible to do anything. Literally, it was like we needed to automate a simple application. It was a Windows application built on a specific technology called Windows Presentation Foundation. That is like one of the most common solutions in the .NET world. No support at all. No support. And then you can discard almost every application that has a magical ribbon from Office is incompatible. So the solution was not capable of emulating it, of clicking it, and then you need to rely on like tricks or workarounds called, let's say click image or thing like that. I don't remember the name that they were using, but image recognition is the proper name. It was a nightmare. So I wouldn't use it. So if you're going to rely on low code, I will check the number ones that you get in Google, not at the ads, but the solutions, and I will go to those ones. Or I will confirm them with other statistics or something that gives you an input. But low code, as you said, the communities might not be very, very large, but there are two things. If you go to the appropriate organizations, they will give you answers. And since you are paying, they will give you the answer. And the community, then you tend to have answers. I can say something about Automation Anywhere in my experience. If I raise a ticket, I got an answer. It was never an exception. And I even had calls with the top managers from the organization. Why? Because my organization is paying a lot of money for the tool. So you can reach even these people because you are paying. Of course, if you go to the free versions, you might need to go to the community, but the communities are pretty active in my experience. However, they are not in Stack Overflow. They have, again, specialized forums only for UiPath, only for something like that. If you ask them in Stack Overflow, my experience is you will not get an answer.
So Federico, it seems to me that this interview has been very extensive. We have touched upon several topics such as the name of the platforms, licensing, how can you perform testing, what are the main use cases for the low-code platforms, and even about the size of the community that is out there using low-code platforms already. But now, it has come the time to prophesize, Federico. That's what we're here for. So, can you please tell us, like, how do you see the future of the low-code platforms? Do you think that they will gain ground in the future, or like they're just like some sort of bubble that will eventually disappear? What are your thoughts on this topic?
In my personal belief, they are gonna eat the market.
Eat the market.
Yeah. And then you're gonna have like two parallel wars in the IT environment, especially in the non-IT companies. You're gonna have the, like, let's say the real coders, the person who are handling databases, the backend, the APIs, the extremely efficient parts, and then you will have the domain experts, the ones who are gonna build the apps over those APIs, over those solutions. And those people are not necessarily going to be software developers, specialists in those fields. If they have access to Office 365 that a lot of organizations have, I would say that even if you need to choose between Office 365 and the G Suite, most of organizations has Office 365. So, and since this is an essential part of Office 365, everyone in the organization has access to it. From the secretary to the manager, even the security guard, if the security guard has access to it, so that person can code it, build his own app for the security guards. And since there is not an extra licensing cost, so it's already there. So that they are gonna eat a lot of the market, yeah. However, there is one thing that I see like that is gonna be very important to deal in the future: governance. Right now, you have things like ETL version 4, those things that can control the organization in the coding environment. But now you will have like two kind of coders. The real coders, like all of us, and the operation coders, that are the people who doesn't have a real background in software development, that they are the domain experts, the domain specialists, but that they are out of that area. So it will be very difficult to handle specifically these projects because they are not going to necessarily follow the patterns since they are not necessarily available. And this can create a curious environment.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, I think about one question more about the future. Will actually it be more low code or more zero code? What do you think? Which of those fields will be the more seen in the future?
I will say that for the next 5 to 10 years, it will be low code, but from the next 10 to 20 years, it's then no code will start playing a bigger role. And why? Because first we need to build the ground. We need to build enough capabilities, enough APIs, enough solutions to reach the no code part. I don't think that we are on that path still. I consider the next decade or the next 2 decades until we reach that point. But yeah, I believe that in the long term, no code will be the major player.
I am really surprised by your answer, I have to say. And I'm getting worried now, Federico, because as a software developer, that this seems that this might also affect my job. And you mentioned something very important. And this is probably going to be my last question, Federico, about the future of low-code platforms. You mentioned that they are going to eat the market. So my question is, do you think that low-code platforms can, at some point in the future, fully replace a software development department within a company?
As I explained many times, it depends on the organization that you are working. If you are working in the organization that is building the tools, well, of course, no, because still you need real software developers that build the ground, that build the new control, that build the new swipe, the new virtual reality. If you're in the innovative sector, like in the areas that really needs that empowerment, the solutions, the innovation, where the real magic happens, no, you will not expose to anything else. But if you are in the area that, let's say that, like I would say in an organization that doesn't really rely on coders, but their main revenue comes from somewhere else, then if you are in the back end, I would say you are less exposed, but it's something that I can outsource somewhere else. But even when you outsource, many times organizations bring it back. So from the back end perspective, I see it not very likely. But from the front end perspective, from the automation perspective, or from the even from these two areas that are, I would say, the main where the coders are involved, I would say you can be exposed.
Mm-hmm.
What is my advice? You need to reskill. Identify one area and start learning about those tools. If you're a front end, hey, why don't you learn about Outsystems today? Don't wait until like 10, 15 years that Outsystems can come and eat your place. No, you need to be smarter. You need to still know how to code, how to be the very best in what you're doing. But to learn a little bit from the no-code part or the low-code platforms is still good, man. Really, you need to always have a backup plan. If the plan A fails because for whatever reason happens, I still have some experience with no code. And if you said, well, but in my organization no one wants to pay for Outsystems, go to Upwork, man. Start offering your services even if it's for very low fees and get experience with the tools. This will be the way. So at the end, it's like, okay, maybe I need to do a chip because low code is eating the market, but I already have some experience with no code, so I can shift. And I ignore the other area. I still already build the skills that I needed, maybe for very low prices, but I already got something that I already have a portfolio of clients that rely, yes, this guy knows how to use low code or no code.
So you have heard it, folks. It's time to start learning a new technology, a new loud code or zero code platform. That's everything for today. Thank you very much, Federico, for enlightening us on this very wide topic of the low code platforms. Would you like to say some last words for the audience?
Reskill today.
Thank you very much, Federico. And thanks again to my co-host, Jenjay, also for co-hosting the show. Jenjay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're Cyber Prophets, prophesizing the future of IT. Until next time.